a woman in the Gospels who had been bleeding for 12 years. And I need you to understand what that means before we go any further. 12 years is not a bad week. 12 years is not a rough season. 12 years is a life. 12 years of doctors who could not help her. 12 years of money spent until there was no money left to spend. 12 years of being called unclean, which in her culture meant untouchable, unwelcome, unseen. 12 years of waking up every single morning to the same verdict about her own body, that she was broken, that she was a burden, that there was no solution for someone like her. And here is what I want you to notice. She had not given up. She was still moving, still pushing, still believing that somewhere in this broken world was the answer she had been searching for. That is not a small thing. Most people tap out long before year 12. Most people decide somewhere around year 2 or 3 that maybe this is just the way things are going to be. But this woman who had every logical reason to stop trying, she heard that Jesus was passing through. And she pressed her way into a crowd that was not making space for her. I want to stop right there, because somebody listening to me right now is this woman. You have been bleeding longer than anybody around you even knows. Not a physical bleed necessarily, though I honor those of you who are walking through physical suffering. I am talking about the quiet bleed, the financial hemorrhage that never quite stops. The emotional wound that keeps reopening every time you think you have finally healed. The relationship that drains you. The grief that surfaces when you least expect it. The anxiety that bleeds peace right out of your days before they even begin. And you have tried everything. You have read the books, attended the conferences, made the appointments, had the hard conversations. You have been responsible. You have been faithful. And still, the situation persists. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought has taken root that you have never said out loud. Maybe this is just my life. Maybe my healing is not available. Maybe breakthrough is for other people, but not for me. That thought is a lie. And I came today to help you dismantle it. Because here is what I notice about this woman. She did not reach Jesus when everything was going well. She did not find him when she had plenty of strength and plenty of faith and plenty of confidence. She found him on the hardest day. She found him after 12 years of disappointment had worn her thin. She pressed through that crowd, bumping into people who did not even know her name, who would have recoiled from her touch, and she reached out one trembling hand and grabbed the hem of his garment. And the moment she touched it, she felt in her body that she was healed. Now here is where I want to flip something on you, because this is the reframe that changed everything for me. When Jesus stopped and asked who touched him, and the disciples said essentially, Lord, this whole crowd is pressing against you. What do you mean, who touched you? Jesus made a distinction that I think we still miss today. He said, somebody touched me. I felt power go out from me. He was not crediting the crowd. He was not even crediting the garment. He looked at this woman who was trembling, who was afraid because she had done something forbidden in public, who probably thought she was about to be exposed and shamed. And he said to her, your faith made you whole. Your faith, not the crowd's energy, not the proximity to holiness, not even the garment itself. Your faith, the internal thing, the invisible thing, the thing nobody could see except God. I need you to hear what that means for where you are right now. You have been waiting for the external condition to change. You have been waiting for the diagnosis to shift before you believe healing is possible. You have been waiting for the bank account to recover before you trust that provision is real. You have been waiting for the relationship to improve before you allow yourself to believe that love is still available to you. You have positioned everything inside of you as contingent on something outside of you. But this woman teaches us something completely different. Her healing did not begin when circumstances changed. Her healing began when faith moved her body. Before the miracle happened externally, something happened internally. She decided to believe. She decided that if she could just reach him, she would not leave the same way she arrived. And that decision, that internal and visible, nobody can see it, decision is what released the power. If you are listening to this message today, I want you to type the word touch in the comments, because what you are really saying is, Lord, I am reaching. I may not feel strong. I may not have a lot left, but I am still pressing. I am still reaching. I am still here. Now let's go deeper, because I think this story has more to teach us than we usually pull from it. The crowd in this passage is significant because the crowd was not trying to hurt her. The crowd was not malicious. The crowd was just moving busybodies. All of them headed toward Jesus with their own needs, their own requests, their own pain. And yet the crowd was the very thing that made it hard for her to reach him. Good people, even well-meaning people, can sometimes crowd out the very access you are trying to gain. No hice, busyness, opinion, the demands of everyone else's urgency. These things can press against you until you forget what you came for in the first place. I want to speak to the woman who has been crowded out of her own purpose. The woman who has been so busy taking care of everyone else that she has not had a moment to press toward her own healing. The woman who spent so long managing everyone else's emergencies that she forgot she was still bleeding. The woman who keeps showing up, keeps giving, keeps holding things together while quietly losing pieces of herself in the process. Baby, that is not sustainable. And I say that with love, not condemnation, but the crowd will keep moving. And if you do not make a decision to press through toward what you need, the crowd will carry you right past the very thing God had for you. This woman did not ask the crowd to part. She did not wait for perfect conditions. She did not stand at the edge of the situation and hope that Jesus would eventually notice her from a distance. She pressed through the noise, through the chaos, through the shame of being unclean in a public space. She pressed, and that pressing cost her something. Humility cost something. Desperation cost something. Choosing to need help when the whole world expects you to be fine, that costs something. But the cost of pressing was nothing compared to 12 years of not being whole. Can I talk to you about the 12 years for a moment? Because I think sometimes we spiritualize the waiting without honoring how hard the waiting actually is. 12 years is long enough to change who you believe you are. 12 years is long enough to convince yourself that suffering is simply your identity. 12 years of a problem will make you start introducing the problem as though it belongs to you. My anxiety, my financial struggle, my failing marriage, my depression. And I understand the language we are naming what we are experiencing. But there is a difference between naming your experience and allowing your experience to name you. This woman did not walk into that crowd announcing herself as the woman with the issue of blood. She walked in as a woman who was still fighting. She walked in as someone who had heard about a man who could do what 12 years of human effort could not. She did not lead with her diagnosis. She pressed with her faith. What are you leading with right now? What story are you telling yourself and others about who you are? Because if the story you are telling is rooted only in what the last 12 years have produced, you may be missing who God says you are becoming. Let me build on something that comes a few verses later. Because after Jesus heals her, he does not just release her and move on. He calls her daughter, daughter. Not patient, not that woman who was unclean, not the one with the issue of blood. Daughter. He called her into relationship with a single word. He reframed her entire identity in a moment that she had probably never experienced before being claimed, being seen, being named as belonging. Some of you have been functioning under the wrong name for a long time. You have been living as though you are defined by what happened to you, defined by what you lost, defined by the verdict someone spoke over you years ago that you never fully shook. And God, right now in this moment, is doing what Jesus did by that roadside. He is not looking at the 12 years. He is looking at the reach. He is looking at the pressing. He is looking at the faith that moved even when everything else said, stay still. And he is calling you daughter. He is calling you healed. He is calling you free. Now I want to shift into the application, because faith without embodiment stays theoretical. This is where it has to get practical. There is a version of trust that looks deeply spiritual, but is actually a sophisticated form of avoidance. It is the trust that says God has this, while simultaneously rehearsing every worst case scenario in the mind on a loop. It sounds like surrender. It dresses like surrender. But underneath it, the anxiety is still running the show. The worry is still making the decisions. The fear is still the loudest voice in the room. Real surrender, the kind that produces the peace Paul describes as passing all understanding. In his letter to the church at Philippi, that kind of surrender is active. It is not passive resignation. It is not pretending the situation does not exist. It is a daily, sometimes hourly choice to hand back the thing you keep picking back up. You ever notice how we pray about something and then 20 minutes later we are doing the mental math again, trying to figure out how it could possibly work out? We say amen and then immediately open the calculator. We lift it to God and then reach right back to pull it down into our own hands. Because silence is uncomfortable and uncertainty feels like evidence that nothing is moving. But let me tell you what the silence actually is. The silence is the God of the universe arranging things in dimensions you do not have access to. The silence is conversations being orchestrated that you could not manufacture. The silence is protection from paths that looked appealing but would have cost you more than you knew. The silence is not absence. The silence is preparation. Moses stood at the edge of the Red Sea after leading over 1 million people out of Egypt, and the sea had not moved yet. The army of Pharaoh was behind them. The water was in front of them. And the people began to do what overwhelmed people do. They begin to panic. And in their panic, they started blaming the man God chose to lead them. They said to Moses, was there not enough room in Egypt to bury us? Did you bring us out here to die? And Moses said something that I want you to hold on to. Stand still and see the salvation of God. Stand still. Two of the hardest words in the English language when everything in your flesh wants to run. Tu fix, to control, to figure out an alternative exit strategy. Stand still. Not because nothing is required of you, not because your action does not matter, but because there are moments when the greatest act of obedience is refusing to move on fear. Do not run back to Egypt. Egypt is comfortable only in memory. You forget the chains once you get far enough from them and start to miss the familiarity. Some of you are being tempted right now to go back to what was comfortable, even though what was comfortable was also what was killing you. The old job that was suffocating your purpose, the relationship that made you feel small, the mindset that kept you stuck. Egypt feels safe because at least you know what to expect from it. But God did not bring you out of Egypt to watch you walk back in. The sea is going to part. I'm not just saying that as a motivational phrase. I am saying it as a prophetic declaration. The thing that looks impassable right now is going to part. But you have to stand at the edge long enough to see it move. You have to resist the pull of Egypt long enough to watch God work. You have to be willing to look like you are standing still while God is moving in the unseen. And I know that is hard. I know it is hard to stand at the edge of your situation and watch people who seem less faithful, less committed, less prayerful, seem to experience open doors while yours remain closed. I know it is hard to keep showing up, keep worshiping, keep believing when the evidence has not caught up with the faith. I know the weariness. I know the tears that happen behind closed doors when you have run out of language to even explain what you are feeling. But I want to talk to you about something that this woman with the issue of blood did that I think we miss because we focus so much on the miracle. She moved while she was still bleeding. She did not wait until she felt better to press toward healing. She pressed while the condition was still active. She acted her way into the miracle, not from the miracle forward. That is the word for somebody today. You have been waiting to feel better before you act in faith. You have been waiting for the anxiety to lift before you worship, waiting for the fear to stop before you take the next step God is asking you to take, waiting for the grief to resolve before you show up for what you are called to. But the miracle is often on the other side of the pressing, not the other side of the feeling. You can press while you are crying. You can reach while you are afraid. You can worship while your situation has not changed. You can move in obedience even when your emotions are not cooperating. Because faith was never designed to be a feeling. Faith is a decision that sometimes you have to make against every feeling you have in that moment. The woman pressed through the crowd while bleeding. The disciples stepped out of the boat while the wind was still blowing. Abraham packed up his household while he did not yet know the destination. Faith moves before the circumstances confirm that moving is wise. And this is the reframe that I want to land in your spirit today. You have been waiting for the courage to feel like courage before you act. But courage never feels like courage from the inside. From the inside, courage feels like terror with your feet still moving. From the inside, faith feels like foolishness that chose to show up anyway. From the inside, the pressing looks nothing like the miracle it produces. And that is why so many people stop right before the breakthrough, because right before the breakthrough, everything in you is telling you there is no breakthrough coming. Let me talk about what the 12 years cost her relationally, because I think this is important. In her culture, someone with her condition was not allowed in public spaces, not allowed to be touched, not allowed in the temple. She was isolated, and isolation has a particular cruelty to it, not just the loneliness, but the way loneliness begins to feel like evidence of your unworthiness. When no one is touching you, you start to believe you are untouchable. When no one is seeking you out, you start to believe you are not worth seeking. When the community closes its arms, you start to internalize the closing. I want to speak to you right now. If isolation has become your theology, if the loneliness you have experienced has convinced you that God is distant, that you are forgotten, that you are somehow outside the circle of what he is doing. Isolation is a circumstance. It is not a verdict. It is not revelation about your value. It is not confirmation that you have been passed over. This woman was isolated for 12 years. And then in one moment, Jesus stopped an entire crowd for her. He stopped his journey, delayed a different miracle. He was on his way to perform and stood still long enough for her to be seen, publicly, fully called by name, though the text does not give us her name. And I think that is by design, because her name is meant to be yours. Her name is meant to be every woman who has been waiting in the crowd, too afraid to push to the front, wondering if she is worthy of being noticed. He stops for you too. Not eventually, not once you get it all together, not once the anxiety is managed and the marriage is repaired and the finances are stable. He stops now. He stops in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the crowd, in the middle of the bleeding. And he says, who touched me? Not because he does not know. He always knows. He asks because he wants to give her the gift of testimony. He wants her to stand up in the place where she had been bent down. He wants her voice to be heard in the space where she had been silent. He is inviting her to own her story. And I want to ask you the same question he asked her. Are you willing to own your story? Not to perform your pain, not to advertise your struggle, but to stand up in the place where fear has kept you crouching and say, I pressed, I was afraid and I pressed. I was worn out and I pressed. I did not know if it would work and I pressed anyway. Because testimony does something for the people around you that a polished presentation never can. When you stand up still shaking and say it was God, it gives permission to the person next to you who is also shaking. It says, you do not have to have it all together before God shows up. You do not have to be fully healed before you testify. You can be in the middle of your story and still tell it. Let me bring this to a crescendo because somebody needs this next part like they need air. There is a peace that is available to you right now that has nothing to do with your circumstances being resolved. Nothing. It does not require the diagnosis to change. It does not require the relationship to heal. It does not require the business to turn a profit, or the child to come back home, or the grief to lift. The peace that Jesus offers is not dependent on any of that. Because if it were, it would not be peace, it would just be relief. And relief is wonderful. I am not dismissing it. But relief leaves when the circumstances shift again. Peace remains. The scripture in the book of Philippians says, the peace of God, which surpasses all human understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. I want you to notice what it guards. Not your situation, not your circumstances, your heart, your mind, the internal space. Because God knows that what happens inside of you will eventually determine how you navigate everything outside of you. When your heart is at peace, you make better decisions. When your mind is at peace, you hear God more clearly. When you are not operating from a place of constant anxiety and fear, you have access to discernment, to wisdom, to the still small voice that sometimes cannot be heard over the noise of panic. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the presence of God in the middle of war. And maybe that is the thing God is building in you right now through the very season you have been begging him to end, not because he enjoys your struggle, because he does not. He is a good father who is moved with compassion by your pain. But because he knows that the peace being formed in you through this fire is the kind of peace that will hold you when the next storm comes. It is the kind of peace that will be a testimony to the people around you who are watching to see if your faith is real. It is the kind of peace that cannot be manufactured by good circumstances because it was forged in hard ones. Press. In the middle of not knowing, press. In the middle of not feeling it, press. In the middle of the crowd that has no space for you, press. Because the same power that stopped for a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years is still alive, still moving, still aware of every trembling hand reaching in your direction. He felt it then. He feels it now. You are not too broken. You are not too late. You are not too far from the him. And here is the quiet thing I want to leave with you. The miracle in this story is not the healing. The healing is the visible part. The miracle, the thing that made the healing possible, was a woman who decided that 12 years of evidence against her was still not enough to stop her from believing. Your faith is making you whole right now. In the pressing, in the reaching, in the not giving up, that is the miracle already happening inside of you.